Welcome to DCS Pathways. I'm Kevin Patton, Pathways Counselor for Dublin City Schools. Choosing courses and planning for life after high school can feel overwhelming. The ideas and resources shared here are intended to help students and families with this important process. This episode features a conversation with Andrew Lay. Andrew graduated from Dublin City Schools in 2021. He went on to Ohio University on their pre-med track and recently earned a bachelor's degree in biological sciences. While he plans to complete medical school at Ohio University's Heritage College of Osteopathic Medicine here in Dublin, currently he's taking a gap year as a visiting researcher at Queen Mary University of London, where he's doing cancer research and learning about opportunities that he may want to pursue in his future. Andrew, thank you so much for calling all the way in from London, England this morning. I guess for you it's not even this morning, but for me it is. So I think it's amazing that I have this opportunity to connect with our alumni all over the world, but really appreciate you making time for this.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. No, I was very interested when I heard about the podcast.
Well, I appreciate that, and I know you haven't been out that long, right? I think you graduated in 2021, but you have completed that first step of earning that bachelor's degree, and rather than jumping right into medical school, I know we'll start with just kind of where you are right now and why you're in London. So maybe talk a little bit about that gap year that you're in.
Yeah, so the program that I'm at, so when I graduated high school, I got accepted into a program called the Early Assurance Program at Ohio University. Basically guarantees you admission into Ohio University's Heritage College of Medicine. And there's two tracks. There's a 4+4 track and there's a 3+4 track. And I was on the 4+4 track. So you graduate in 4 years and then they accept you into medical school the following year. But I ended up doing a lot of APs and IBs while I was at Kaufman. So I was lucky enough that I could graduate a year early and take a gap year. And while I was doing my undergraduate studies, I was doing research over at Ohio University. And that eventually led me to get an opportunity to do research here over in London. So right now I'm researching non-functioning pituitary adenomas, so brain cancer over here in London. And yeah, it's been a very great opportunity. And it's actually led me to think about pursuing a dual DO PhD. When I go to medical school, I can get my PhD and my DO at the same time.
That sounds like a lot of work. It sounds like an incredible opportunity.
It's a lot of school. It's a lot of school. But honestly, I think I'm very passionate about my research. At first, it was one of those things where you just, I need to stack up my resume. But as I got more into it, it's just super cool to be able to find an issue and figure out an answer for it. And sometimes you don't figure out an answer for it, and that's okay.
That's right. You still learn so much in the process, and you add so much to that field of information that others can use to continue research, and that's how groundbreaking things happen. It's that collaboration of all of those amazing people such as yourself who are taking the time to really try to solve some of these major issues in healthcare. So was there a particular research project you did in college that you would like to highlight that really kind of sparked that passion that you referenced?
The lab I worked in, my PI, my principal investigator, was Dr. John Kopchik, he's a pretty big name in the endocrinology community because he created this drug called pegvisomant, which is it's a growth hormone antagonist. So they use it for anybody that produces too much growth hormone. So they have a condition called acromegaly, and basically it allows them to live a more normal life just by not producing so much growth hormone. Usually they come out, it's called gigantism, also come out taller, and they have some pituitary defects. So when I was in college, because he did create this drug, and it was nice that we got to research it for free, basically, because we got it in from Pfizer. I worked on using it as a combination therapy against metastatic triple-negative breast cancer. So triple-negative breast cancer, it is the hardest breast cancer to treat just because it is negative for 3 of the receptors that you would usually use to treat it locally. So instead you have to use a general chemotherapy for it, which is damaging to your other cells. So we tried to use pegvisomant to decrease the amount of growth hormone any of the tumors were producing. That way it would be easier for oncologists to treat.
That's incredible. And I think for you as a college student to get to see real world application like that and to see that this could have major impact on the lives of people. It's not surprising that what started out as something to just, hey, I'm going to try this and it'll be a good resume builder if nothing else. But all of a sudden now you can really see the difference it can have in the world. And of course that's going to draw you in and make it more exciting. So I think it's amazing that you were able to have that experience, and then it's led you now to overseas and to experience a new culture and new types of physicians and researchers who have gone through training in another part of the world, and you get to learn about some of the different perspectives. And I would just love for you to share a little bit about how that experience has gone so far and where you could see it taking you from here and until you decide to come back to medical school.
Yeah, one of the coolest things, well, especially just because a lot of my research there has translated here just because it's both endocrinology-based research. I research pituitary tumors here. But one of the coolest things about working here is the collaboration. Before, when I worked in my lab at OU doesn't have a school hospital or anything, but QMUL here does. So I don't work with just other researchers. I work with a combination. I work with endocrinologists, so physicians. I work with PhD students. I work with postdocs. So the collaboration is really cool just to be able to see if we do this, I can ask a physician on what like a patient's side effects would be if we try to treat with this. And it's really cool to have a central hospital. I'll run back and forth between the hospital carrying like tumors on the bus and stuff to bring back here. And yeah, another thing about being over here is also experiencing a different healthcare system, right? Working with physicians and stuff. I think as Americans, sometimes we think about Europe and we're like, oh, they've got, a perfect healthcare system. Everything's free. And while that is very good that they have very accessible healthcare, there are other pros and cons that come with it. So talking with physicians here, because the physician pay is so low here compared to the US, but it's the same amount of schooling, it's the same amount of work you have to take. There's a lot lower incentive for people to be physicians here. So there is a lot of clogging in the system. So it's a lot harder for patients to get just a normal doctor's appointment. Sometimes you have to wait months and months for a physician to become available. So it's really cool to see what things go well when you come into this kind of healthcare systems and what things don't. And I think that'll be really important for my life later as a physician. If I ever want to go into management or anything like that, I think this experience has been very helpful.
No, I think that's great. And I think that's the value of taking those gap years, right? You were a student for 3 years in your undergrad, and it gave you that opportunity to kind of press pause and really just focus on something that you were really enjoying. But more importantly, it gives you access to all of these professions that maybe you weren't considering before you make that big decision about what you want to specialize in when you go back to school. So now all of a sudden you have all of these connections you've made. You can learn about different roles that you might want to pursue because now you've actually worked with these people and you can really get insight from them about what their jobs are like and what that might look like for you in your future. So as you come back, do you feel like you've had a shift in what you might end up pursuing when you come back to the United States to go to medical school?
Yeah. So one of the things I was saying before is just doing so much research. I've realized I am very passionate about my projects here and my project I worked on back at home. And it has made me think about pursuing a combined PhD DO degree. That way I could continue doing research on as a physician. And when I'm looking at my specialties, obviously I would rather wait until I do my rotations to figure out what I want to do. But I'm leaning towards endocrinology. I've worked with so many endocrinologists. I really like them. I really like the work they do. I've gotten to go to patient clinics and see sometimes when nobody in the hospital can figure out, sometimes the first person they go to is an endocrinologist. Sometimes there's a hormone imbalance nobody thought about. So I think it's definitely, I wouldn't say I'm like 100% sure on what I want to do, but I think this experience has definitely helped me lean towards somewhere.
That's awesome. Well, I love that you are getting to have that experience, and I think it's going to be so valuable for you when you come back to make those big life decisions. So speaking of those big decisions, we'll go back a little bit to when you were in high school deciding to pursue medicine. What was that college search process like? I know you ended up at OU and you talked about that program that obviously was very appealing to you, the early assurance program. And I think that's something that we want to make sure students are aware of, these types of things that exist. And I know OU isn't the only one that offers it, but obviously that was something that really resonated with you. So talk a little bit about what you were going through when you were making that decision about what to do after high school and how you landed on OU.
Medicine was something I was a little unsure about in my high school years, but I thought let's settle on this, and if anything changes, then I can change it in college, But I thought that having a good like baseline program would be good to think about. So looking at those BSDO, BSMD programs, I thought it was very good to be able to have a guarantee that would let me focus on other things like being able to go do research and stuff. I think some of the schools I looked at University of Cincinnati. They had a BSMD program, so very similar. I think instead of a minimum GPA you have to hit, I think there's a minimum MCAT you have to hit. And the Case Western had one too. And I think I looked at Baylor. I think Rice also had a program. So I ended up not getting into Cincy's because they canceled the program my year because of COVID. They didn't do any interviews for the program that year because COVID. They said you can come in your undergraduate and then interview later. And Case Western, I got into Case Western's undergrad, but not into their combined program. I got into Rice off of wait list, but not into their program. And also it was very expensive to go out of state to Rice. And then I ended up, I could have chosen between OU and the early assurance program, and I could have chosen Ohio State and just go a normal undergrad route as a pre-med. So I did a lot of thinking about it. I had a lot of friends going to Ohio State. I grew up in Columbus, big Ohio State football fan, go Bucks, But I think at the end of the day, I chose OU because I did really like how patient care, how much focus is in patient care when it comes to being an osteopathic physician. It's something they really like to look at whole patients' lives. I've seen osteopathic physicians work before I decided, and I see how they interact with their patients, and they're very personal people. They know their whole patients' lives, and I think that's something that's really important to me, especially after working in a pharmacy. I feel like I got to know my patients really well, and I think that's what made me decide on OU. And it's a fantastic program, good medical school, and also the campus I'll be going to is right in Dublin, which is important to me to be close to family.
That's awesome. And I think that's something, again, a lot of students who think they're interested in medicine, but obviously aren't sure, right? A lot of people, even who are positive they're going to go that route, end up changing their mind later. But I think to have that option of knowing, hey, if I do pursue that path and I have a guarantee into a medical school program, I don't know that students realize how amazing that is, because it can be such a stressful part of the experience when you're trying to become a doctor, to figure out where can I get in and what part of the country is it going to be. And now all of a sudden it can really just take a lot of that pressure off. And to your point, allow you to focus on things that are more relevant to what you want to learn about, and to be able to go and take a gap year and focus on the research and not so much on an application. And obviously the MCATs are still a part of it, I would imagine, but it's just a different level of pressure that comes from when you don't know where you're going to end up.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And you do have the option to apply out, but I was happy with where I was at.
No, I think that's
and
great.
Also graduating in 3 years also to allow me to have that gap year is kind of unheard of for any other program if I were to do it regularly, because OU took my AP and my IB credits. So yeah, definitely having this gap year was also really important for me.
That's awesome. And I think it's great that you found a school that was willing to work with some of the amazing things you did in high school to set yourself up for that flexibility down the road. And I'm curious, what do you feel like are some of the opportunities that you had at a school like Ohio University that maybe you wouldn't have had at other institutions that you were considering? Like, what were some of the things that really stood out to you as this is very special because I'm at this place?
One of the things about Ohio University I really liked is, for one, everybody says this beautiful campus. It just makes me happy to go out and see all the trees. I was like, I live in such a pretty place. It's really nice. Specifically though, I think, especially if I'm leaning towards endocrinology, we have a very good research program there. We have a lot of good research programs, especially a lot of research they don't pay their undergraduate students. That's pretty common. OU does for a lot of their labs. They pay their students. So that was pretty cool to be able to work and get money for it. And Dr. Kopchik, who I worked for, is a pretty big endocrinology name and who has led me to many different connections, in Denmark, whether here or Denmark. So I think that the research was a pretty big deal. Obviously, there are other places with really good research, but OU's is really good. And also they specialize in focusing on rural healthcare, I think is a very unique experience that a lot of people don't get.
No, I love hearing that. And I think sometimes people, especially very high achieving students who want to pursue medicine, who just feel like they have to go to big name, splashy name schools after high school and just kind of don't even consider options that might be a better fit for them because maybe it's not as competitive to get into. Now, I know OU is the level of competition to get into the program that we're talking about, that early assurance it's a different level of difficult to get into than just getting into OU as a college student. But it's still different than getting into some of the other programs, even the ones that you referenced that might have something similar, but are even a little more competitive. Would you say that once you were there and you got into that program, what was the competition like to get research opportunities? Because I know that varies across campus to campus as well.
I think that was another good thing at OU is research is pretty accessible if you ask around your professors. OU is a pretty big undergraduate university, but also at the same time, for some reason, it feels really small at the same time. I feel like I knew almost everybody in my class. So I think it was very specialized. Like your professors have no problem taking out time to go have a coffee with you, to go talk to you about what you're interested in. and what you want to go into, you just have to take that step. Stay after class, talk to your professor, and so many times they'll have a spot in their lab or something like that. The reason I got into mine, I was in Phi DE, Phi Delta Epsilon, which is like a medical professional fraternity. And luckily enough, somebody else who was in it was Yosri Slama, an upperclassman while I was at high school. And he told me, oh, there's a spot in Dr. Kopchik's lab. It's a really good lab. If you want, I'll talk to somebody and we can get you an interview set up. And here I am now.
No, I love that. And I actually knew Yosri. I was his counselor back in his Kaufman days. So I love hearing that you had that Kaufman connection. And that's what we're trying to create with this podcast, is just more opportunities to connect with alumni and people who are a little bit ahead of you, but doing things that you could see yourself doing or have goals of becoming. And I think all of a sudden you have a very realistic connection with somebody to reach out to and get some great advice. So I love that that's how you ended up in that lab. And certainly it's led to some really cool opportunities for you outside of your time at OU.
Absolutely. Yeah, no. Yeah, I feel like, always happy to help out like a Dublin Kaufman alum. I still have friends from Dublin Kaufman. Chris Maloney, one of my friends, just came to visit a few weeks ago. And yeah, always happy to help.
That's awesome. Well, I hope some people take you up on that. You also referenced the working in the pharmacy while you were in college. And I know your parents are pharmacists, so that was something that you knew was a great option for you growing up. But even going into college and knowing that necessarily wasn't going to be what you were pursuing, you still became a pharmacy technician. So I'd love for you to share, how did you do that? How difficult is it to get into a role like that? And what was the value of that for somebody pursuing other opportunities in medicine, not necessarily in pharmacy?
Even when I entered my undergraduate and I was in this program, I was still a little unsure about being a physician in general. I was like, if I don't want to be a physician, I could always check out pharmacy. So I was like, should work at a pharmacy. I can make some money. And I think it'll be a good experience. So it's not too difficult to get into pharmacy technician. Honestly, pharmacies are always understaffed. So they're always in need of help, and they let you work for a year and then you have to take like a pharmacy technician exam, Ohio State pharmacy technician exam. But after you work for a year, it's not that hard. Like you don't have to study, like it's just stuff you remember from working. And I think after working in a pharmacy, I learned that I don't want to go into pharmacy. It was cool to work in a pharmacy. I learned it was just not for me. But I think what helped me affirm that I didn't want to go to pharmacy is, well, not helping it affirm to go to pharmacy, but what helped me realize that I definitely wanted to be a physician is I saw how physicians interacted with us as a pharmacy. I saw really good physicians who were happy to take calls, help us out, figure things out. There's a lot of times we have to call them because they wrote a script wrong or they've forgotten their DEA number. And I saw physicians who were really bad at it. I saw physicians who were unwilling to make that connection. And that's another thing about, being an osteopathic physician. You focus on a holistic medical system. So you want your pharmacy to work with your doctor. You don't want that to be a separate system because that leads to all sorts of confusions that can lead to issues for the patient. So I think one of the things I'll know when I'm a physician is that I will definitely want to be in contact with my pharmacists and make sure they know what's going on, and it'll help with any issues like that. And I think that just makes a better system for the patient overall.
No, I think that's great perspective. And certainly it is a team approach to caring for the patient and when everybody's on the same page and communicating. And that's when things go right. And when that's not happening, that's when things can slip through the cracks. And certainly it sounds like you firsthand saw both sides of that coin. And I think it's great that it certainly has set you up to be somebody that is going to work so well, not just with the pharmacists and the techs, but really anybody that's on that team that's caring for the patient. I think that's great perspective. So let's take a step back and even go further into your background, because I know you did some incredible things in high school in relation to exploring this area of interest. So I'd love for you to talk about some of the things like the Biomedical Research Academy and your time in HOSA and even your time as a volunteer. What are some of the things that you did that you feel like really set you up for where you are now?
HOSA was a really cool club that I think my friend was president. I don't actually remember. I was in with my friends Alex Abreu, Will Sun, and I think my friend Kailash. And at first it was really cool just because we had a lot of people coming in and talking about their work as healthcare workers. So I remember we had the president of Ohio Health come in, and one of the really interesting things I heard from him was he was a religion major when he was in college and ended up being a plastic surgeon. And he was one of the best plastic surgeons in the state. But he talked about how studying religion helped him really tackle ethical issues that comes up when different patients have different religions. Some patients can't get their blood drawn. Some can't take organ donations, and he said learning about religion really gave him a cool overall view on how to tackle that. I thought that was super cool. And we did a lot on, hosted a biomedical debate club. So I think that year we debated on vaccines. But it was very cool to see all those perspectives from people our age and seeing what they researched on, what they worked on, how they were going to argue against us. So HOSA was super cool in that. So that's honestly where I think I got my first interest in being a physician. Volunteering was also, I did a lot of volunteering when I was in student council. I was student council president my last year at Kaufman. And my last 2 years at Kaufman were pretty flooded by COVID though. I don't think I did that much volunteering my last 2 years. But my first 2 years, we did a lot of volunteering with food drives and a lot of babysitting like teachers' kids during like parent teacher night. I remember those. Those were fun. I think something important there is that it was fun. It was fun to help people with your friends. Like I think joining a club like that and making friends is the best part because, sometimes if you're volunteering alone, obviously it's still a good thing, but it can get in your head sometimes. And volunteering with friends is always fun.
I thought I noticed that you'd done some volunteer work at the Dublin Methodist Hospital as well.
That was another Dublin Kaufman connection that helped me out there. I think Claire Connolly was a volunteer at Methodist, and she said she could hook me up with a position. I worked a lot in the NICU over at Dublin Methodist, and I think something important I learned there was that there are a lot of happy moments in medicine. I feel like a lot of times we talk about disease, I'm researching cancer, we see a lot of bad prognoses, but being able to see happy parents bring home their new kids, that was actually an unbelievable experience for me. And it was good to see people happy. Working with cancer, honestly, there are a lot of bad moments more than good sometimes, but it's good to always remember that we are working to make people happy and to lead happy lives.
No, I think that it's incredible that you had those experiences early on and to be able to even just be in a supporting role to those that will be in more of a supporting role for you in the future, right? So all those incredible nurses who are doing the work that's so critical to patient care. And I think just for you to have the perspective and the experience to get to help them and add value in any small way that you could as a high school student is going to make you such a better physician in the future. And I think the similar experience that you had as a pharmacy technician, right? You were in that supporting role, you were helping patients, you were supporting the pharmacists. It just gives you incredible perspective. And not only will it make you better when you get older and are in those more advanced roles, but I think it's going to make you so much more competitive as an applicant because of the experiences and your willingness to be in those supporting situations and to help. And I think people are going to see the value of that. And I think it is so competitive to get jobs in the future, but when you've done that kind of work from a very young age throughout all of your time beyond high school as well, you're going to stand out in all the right ways. So I think it's so cool that you share those experiences.
Yeah, thank you. No, it was, especially working with the nurses. That's another thing I learned is nurses do a lot. It is incredible the amount of work that a nurse does. And they're like one of the like backbones of the medical community. Like it is incredible the amount of work a nurse does. So I have big respect for the nursing community out there.
Yeah, I love that you got to see that firsthand. So obviously when you come back and you have an opportunity to get started here, you've got those 4 years of medical school. What does that path look like beyond those 4 years for somebody who's not really sure what that looks like? When will you actually get to start working?
Yeah. So when you graduate medical school, there's something called a match day. And it happens before you graduate, really. So you are applying to different residency programs, trying to figure out what specialty you want to go into. And most people match. Once you get into medical school, it's most likely that you'll match. It's like usually very high match rates, also depending on the specialty, but very high match rates overall. And then after that, you go to residency, and then you are a doctor and you get paid, but you're still in training, right? So residency can last from anywhere to 2 to maybe 6 years almost. Depends what specialty you're in. Family medicine is like a pretty basic residency. Something like neurosurgery would be a much longer residency. So that's how long that'll last. But you get paid during that time. You're working a lot though. So you'll get paid maybe $60,000, $70,000 a year. You're probably getting paid $11 an hour just because how much you're working, right? But by the end of those 4 years or however long your residency is, then you will be, well, you can also pick up a fellowship after that if you want to go more into, sometimes research or higher positions. And after all that's said and done, then you get to be an attending and a full-fledged doctor. And then you will have what a normal physician salary would look like, depending on whatever specialty you go into.
Right. So at that point, you're looking at being in your late 20s, early 30s before you're really starting that first job that you went to school for.
Yeah. I think that's another reason why having a gap year was really cool for me. I'm like, get to live a year as an adult outside of like any school system before, I spend the rest of my life studying and figuring out how to be a physician.
Well, we're lucky to have people like you in this world who are willing to do that. And I am thankful that you have, and that you have this opportunity to go and just travel and do some really cool research and network in amazing ways. And I think you're going to be back here before you know it, but just enjoy that time that you have. And I can't wait to see what you end up doing once you complete all of this school that's ahead of you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. No, this was fun to talk about. And I hope, if anybody has any questions, they should feel free to reach out.
Absolutely. So last question I'll throw out there, and I know you've shared so much already, but is there anything that you wish you had known or any parting words that you'd like to share with people as we wrap up the conversation?
I would say organize your time. Once you hit college or whatever you end up doing after high school, you have a lot of time. High school takes up most of your day, like from 9 to 5, 7 to 5, whether you have sports or whatever you're doing. But once you're in college, sometimes you have 2 classes a day, only 3 classes a day. And you have a lot of time in between where you can be doing stuff. And sometimes it's really easy to say, I've got a couple hours between class, I'm just going to play Fortnite. I've been guilty of that plenty of times. But figure out something to do, whether it be for fun or for furthering your career. You have so much time, figure out how to use it well.
I think that's great advice, because you're not wrong. That those 4 years fly by, or however long you end up there. And I think if you are somebody who uses that time wisely and gets involved in organizations and does research and develops relationships with professors, those are the people who end up doing the coolest things beyond college. So I think that's great advice, and can't wait to share all of the great wisdom that you had to share. You've done a lot, and you have so much amazing things to share from your perspective. So thank you for making time for this.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Mr. Patton.
Thanks for listening. Please do not hesitate to reach out with any questions about the many resources we have in Dublin City Schools related to exploring post-secondary options. My email address is patton_kevin@dublinschools.net. I also want to give special thanks to student intern Cam Williams from the DCS Media Marketing Academy. Cam designed the cover art for the show and will be sharing regular updates via social media. Be sure to follow Cam's posts at DCS Pathways Pod on Instagram and TikTok. Hope to see you next week.